Please welcome veteran DynamicsCon presenter Deb Schaffer. Today, this speaker will be presenting the session comparing Dynamics GP to Dynamics Business Central. Please stick around after Deb's session for a live Q&A.
Good morning. My name is Deb Schaffer, and I am welcoming you to a Dynamics GP session through DynamicsCon. This morning's session is going to be comparing Dynamics GP to Dynamics Business Central. My name is Deb Schaffer, and I work with Stoneridge Software and have been in the Dynamics space for a number of years. I am the solution architect lead on the SMB team at Stoneridge, and I've been in the space for 23 years, working with Dynamics GP, CRM, and Business Central. This morning's topics are going to be on segments versus dimensions, number series, smart lists versus list pages, looking at journals, and then looking at management reporter versus financial reports. And so this session is really designed to give you a comparison of Dynamics GP and answer some questions as to the functionality in Dynamics Business Central if you're looking to move to Business Central. So the first area that we're going to start in this morning is talking about segments versus dimensions. So within Dynamics GP, what you have below is a screenshot for the account format setup. And this is showing you in Dynamics GP how your chart of accounts is set up. So what we can see here is we have our maximum account length at 45 and our maximum segments at 5. So GP does allow up to 66 characters and 10 segments, but typically when we've done an implementation of Dynamics GP, we limit it to 45 and 5. It still gives our users the ability to expand their chart of accounts if they need. But it's a good number to look at and restrict down to so that your chart of accounts maybe doesn't get out of control. So the next line below that in red, so again, red and bold means those are required fields. So our account length is actually going to be 9 characters and our segments are 3. So what that says is that we have the ability to expand our chart of accounts if we need to in the future. But right now what we're using is just an account length of 9 characters and 3 segments. So then in the middle section, we're showing those segments and how that account number is going to be broken up. So we have our division, that's going to be 3 characters, our main account, which is 4 characters, and our department, which is 2 characters. We also identify at the very bottom what our main segment ID is, meaning what is our actual main account number that we're going to be using. And so that's our account. And then we're going to separate these with a dash or a hyphen. So now we're going to take a look at Dynamics Business Central. So within Dynamics Business Central, this is your home page for Business Central. So on this page, across the top, we've got our main menu bar. And then the next layer of options here is our shortcuts or bookmarks, windows that we frequently go into that we need to get to quickly. So within the finance area, this is where we're going to find things like our general journals, our chart of accounts, financial reporting, dimensions. And so the first thing that I'm going to actually take a look at is our chart of accounts here. So within Business Central, our chart of accounts is truly just the accounts themselves. So when we think back to that account format page for Dynamics GP, the account number, that's what you're seeing here in the chart of accounts in Business Central. So it's truly just our GL accounts. So how do we add then our dimensions or segments that we have in GP? We do that through dimensions. So within Business Central, if we take a look at our dimensions, then we are able to see the different ways that we want to slice and dice our data within Business Central. In Business Central, you're allowed to have up to 8 dimensions, and within those dimensions, you can have any number of values. So There's a number of benefits to doing it this way, and we're going to take a look at just how the dimensions are set up here first, and then talk through what those benefits are. So when we look in this case, we have a dimension for area or business group, customer groups, department, purchaser, sales campaign, and salesperson. In this scenario, we can slice our data based on any one of these different dimensions. If we go look at our department, we can go in and look at our dimension values. And again, we can have as many dimension values within a dimension as we need to. Excuse me. So in this case, we have administration, production, sales, service, and support. So whenever we enter transactions into Business Central, we not only drive our posting accounts from our chart of accounts, but we can also derive those dimension values and have those values attached to those transactions so that when we're running those reports, our financial reports or any even within subledger reports, we can pull out dimension values and get that data broken down by those different dimensions as we need to. We can also group by or use a dimension called salesperson, maybe business group, customer group. We could do small, medium, large. Maybe our business group is home, commercial, industrial. There's a number of different ways that you can split these out. If you want to do divisions similar to what you had in GP, that's fine as well. So it's really about what are the ways that you need to slice and dice your data, and what data do you need to be able to report on and get out of this system. So I'm going to go back to our home page here in Business Central and go back to our presentation. So the next thing that I wanted to take a look at is the number series. So below we have the payable setup options window out of Dynamics GP. So in this window, this is where we go in and we define what does our invoice look like. So when we do an invoice document, that code is going to come through with an INV code. So we know when we look at that, we can tell where that transaction came from, whether it was an invoice, finance charges, miscellaneous charges, returns or credit memos, payments, and then if we're using scheduled payments at all, we can set that up. We can also do things like identify the next temporary vendor ID. So we've defined that here. And then we've got our next voucher number and next payment number. And so within Dynamics GP, every module has a setup like this that you need to go into and set up so that you know your next numbers. Typically, we'll do things like take out a bunch of leading zeros because we don't necessarily need all those, but you have that ability to make updates to those. So we're going to go back to Business Central now, and we're going to look at how Business Central handles that number series setup. So within Business Central, if we go to the number series, and so this search magnifying glass will allow you to just go in and search for whatever it is that you're wanting to go do next. So in this case, I want to go into my number series. So in Business Central, all of the number series settings are set up in this particular window. So within the number series, we can go in and we can see our bank number series, or we can scroll down and we can see our fixed asset journals or our general journals. We can go in and look at the very, in the middle here, oops, we can look at our purchase documents. So here's our purchase invoice and our posted purchase invoice. Within this area, we can also see what our number series are, starting and ending, and we can see the last date used and the last number used. So we know where we're at with that, with the numbering series and what the expectation is for the next document. If we scroll down, we also have for our vendor here. So we've decided in this case that our vendor is going to start with V, 3 zeros, and an incremental number, and end at V with all 9s and the last character 0. In this window, we also have the ability to define whether we're going to use the default numbers or if we're going to allow manual numbers or both. So if both of these are checked, what that means is that if I go in and I create a new vendor, I can choose to either use the number series that I have defined, or I can manually enter a number. Now you also have the ability to do things like create relationships, where if you always have, say, two different vendor sets. Maybe you want to define that if a vendor comes from this area of the business, it has this number series. And if a vendor comes from the other area of your business, then it has this number series. So you have that flexibility to be able to drive to, again, assist in reporting based on what you need to be able to report on and get out of the system. Because the data that you put in obviously directly reflects the data that you need to get out. So your considerations when you're doing setup for these is that you need to go in and think about what it is you need to get out of the system. So as you're making decisions on setup, making sure that you're defining and understanding what data you need to get out of the system so that it's set up to do so for you. Also within your number series, you do have the ability to go in and drive by dates. So if I open up to go into our number series and edit the lines, we can also drive by dates. So if you know that you're going to add, say, a particular group of vendors that you want to use a special numbering series for, you could come in here and define a starting date, and then whatever that starting number is and an ending, rough estimate, ending number is for those vendors. And again, you're still going to track then the last date that was used, the last number that was used. If you want to define a warning number, so meaning do you want a notification that says, hey, you're at this number and that's near the end of your number series, then you can have that identified here. And then you can also choose how you want to increment those numbers. Do you want to increment by 1, by 5, by 10? And in GP, the reason for doing that incrementing, which we would do manually, is that it then gives you space. So if you're trying to keep your, say, vendor list alphabetized or using that number series, because you could sort either by the vendor name or the vendor number. So it really doesn't come into play like it did in the manual systems, as I'm dating myself, where you really had to design your layouts and number series so that you could insert when you either got a new vendor or a new customer or well, those would be the two main ones, or chart of accounts. You would build in that ability to insert numbers where they needed to be inserted. In Business Central, we can just say that we're going to increment those numbers by 10, and really it doesn't matter if you're inserting later because there's so many things that you can sort on, whether it's the number, the name. You can sort on things like addresses and zip codes, and we're going to go take a look at that as well. So that's our number series within Business Central. So I'm going to bring us back to our home page, and I'm going to go back to our demo or our slideshow. So the next area that I want to take a look at is Smart Lists versus List Pages. So within Dynamics GP, we have the ability to run Smart Lists. So when you go up to Microsoft Dynamics GP in the upper left corner and you scroll down and choose Smart Lists, that's going to open up this Smart List page that you're seeing. This page shows you all of the Smart Lists for all modules within Dynamics GP. So you can go in, and I'm showing the payables transaction open AP list here. This is an out-of-the-box report showing your open AP, and within that, it's initially started by voucher number, by vendor ID, your document type, date, doc number, and the transaction amount. There can be additional columns after that. And if you do things like go into the columns, you can actually sort how these columns are laid out on your Smart List. As well as if you go to the search, you can do things like filter on a particular vendor or a particular document type or within a particular date range. You can also choose the number of records that you're going to search through. So if you've been on Dynamics GP for many, many years, you may have thousands of documents or hundreds of thousands of documents. And so by doing that search, you can restrict how many documents you are looking at or the date range that you're looking at so that you're not pulling out all your historical data at once. And if you do that, it can take a little while to run those reports. Well, within Dynamics BC, and I'm going to switch this back over to Business Central, whenever you go into something like I showed earlier, the chart of accounts, we're going to actually go take a look at our purchase invoices first of all. So when we look at those purchase invoices, this is what we're seeing. So I have the view open here and I can collapse that and I'll bring that back in just a second. But this list is going to show us every time you go in here, your open purchase invoices in this case. So these are all of the invoices that I have in the system that are entered and ready to be posted. So I can see that I've got a number of invoices for Fabricam and First Up Consultants and Graphic Design Institute. And so in this window, I could go in and I could sort on this, or I can filter on this list. Very similar to how you do your sorting and filtering in Smart Lists. You can do the same thing on all of these list pages throughout Business Central. So if I wanted to go in and I wanted to put that filter pane back on, then I can do that. And let's say I wanted to filter this list by the amount, and I wanted to do an amount that was, well, we could even do 214.00. And that's going to give me just that one invoice. Very similar to your smart lists, we can choose to filter by any of the available columns. So these are the visible columns first. So we have our number, the buy from vendor, name and number, our vendor invoice, location if we're using that. We could have an assigned user ID on the transaction, and again, our dollar amount. But then we also have all of the available fields related to, in this case, it's our vendors and our invoices that we have outstanding for these vendors, and all the information related to those. So you can scroll through this list and you can see everything that's available to sort by. Once you choose and make these selections, very similar to Smart Lists in GP, you can then save that report. So let's say I wanted to just keep a report of my Fabricam customers, or sorry, vendor. So I could choose my buy from vendor. I want to choose Fabricam. And so this is going to give me just my listing of open invoices for Fabricam. At this point, if I wanted to save this so that I could always just come in here and see those invoices, then I can click on the disk with the pencil, the save as, and I want to just call this is my 10,000 Fabricam. And now I can save that. So if I click back on all, that's going to give me all of my open invoices again. But then I also have my 10,000 Fabricam, and I can see that. Now when I close this filtering, I have the ability then when I open this window, so we're just in the purchase invoice list page, that we can go in and I can look at all. I can look at just my 10,000 Fabricam. I could look at vendor order addresses depending on what all I had set up, but any list that I had saved here in this filtering would show in this list related to purchase invoices, just purchase invoices. Also within that list page, again, you have the ability to sort on any of these column headers. So I can click on vendor invoice number and it'll sort that way. I can flip that sorting. If I click on the drop down, I can choose ascending, descending. If I want to filter on a value, or if I need to clear a filter, I can do that as well. And I can do the same thing with a vendor name and vendor number. I could do that with my document numbers, and I could do that with my dollar amounts as well. All right, the next area that I am going to switch to, and I'm just checking my time to make sure that I am on track. And so I am going to go back to, our PowerPoint slide. And also there is a live Q&A chat, and if you want to go ahead and enter any questions in that, I can review those. We'll be live during the presentation and there, so I can answer those questions then, or after the recording ends, then we'll also have additional time that if we need to go through those, we can. So the next place that I want to take a look at is within the journals. So within Dynamics GP, what you're seeing here now is the transaction entry page, and this is for the general ledger. So within our general ledger, we've got our journal entry number and our batch ID, what our transaction type is, whether it's standard or reversing, our source document, so telling us where this is coming from, our reference information, which is a required field, and you do have to key that in each time. We had our transaction date, and then there are some additional user-defined fields that were added for the general journal transaction entry. Those are within the general ledger setup page, and you can go define whatever you'd like to track those additional user-defined fields on the GL, and that's in GP. And then we have our accounts. And so we have our account numbers, we've got our dashes because the system knows that we've got our 3 segments. We have our division, our main account, and our department. And then we have our dollar amounts, positive and negative. Across the top, we have our post function, correct, copy, and paste. So that's how our journal entry looks in Dynamics GP. When we go into Business Central, and so I'm going to bring us over to Business Central, and we're going to look at our journal entries. And within Dynamics BC, every transaction is based on a journal. So any type of transactions that you're going to do, whether it's a purchase invoice, whether it's a sales order or sales invoice, or your general ledger transactions, a cash receipt, or a payment journal, everything is going to be identified as a journal. And you always have that ability to go in and enter transactions but not post them right away. You're not forced to post any of the transactions in here. So when we look at cash management, and I want to go in and do a payment journal. So this is where I'm going to do my select checks function in GP, where I'm going to go in and I'm going to do that check run for my payables invoices. Within Business Central, you're going to go into your payment journal, and we can see our different payment journals that are out here. I have an AP payments, a cash journal, payment journal, a general, and a bank rec journal in this case. The one that we're going to take a look at here is our AP payments journal. So this is set up where our balance account type is either a bank account or a balance account number, our number series. And so our number series is defining what's the number series that Business Central is going to use when we create and post this transactions for the payment journal, so our check run. And one thing I will say here is that even within this list, when you create these different payment journals, so I purposely set this one up incorrectly to show you. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit this list. And for my AP payments, my balance account type really has to be a bank account, because when I go in and I do that payment run is doing the last step of our process from our, even starting with a purchase invoice. So our purchase invoice is our expense and payables, or a purchase and payables, or inventory and payables. And then when we're doing this AP check run, now it's going to be our offset for our GL posting that is going to be AP and cash. So we really want this to be our bank account, and then we can define which bank account that's going to come out of. So once I've edited that, then I'm going to back out of that window, and I'm going to go into my AP payments journal. And in this window, so again, everything in Business Central is journal driven. So all of your windows are going to look very similar as far as entering in these journal transactions. So we've got our posting date that we're driving, document date, what kind of document is this? This is payment. We've got a starting document number. If we want to use an external document number, we can. We've got our vendor. What's our vendor number that we're going to bring in? Our recipient bank, description, currency codes. We have our payment method codes, payment reference. Our balance account type defaults in from the setup page that we were just on. And then our applies to doc numbers, the transaction type code, and check printing. Further down, we have our dimensions. And these are the dimensions that we've identified that we want to show up on every transaction. So we're looking at our department and our customer group. These don't necessarily have to be populated, but you can also set them to be required, so that if you need to have a required transaction here, then you can do that. So similar to GP, where you can go in and when you do your select checks, you can have the system go through and find for you all of the open invoices that are ready to be paid based on criteria that you select. So I'm going to go into prepare. I'm going to do suggest vendor payments. And I'm actually going to limit this to my one vendor because I know I have some transactions out there and I don't really need to bring everything in for this example. But I just want to walk through how that works. You could leave this blank and the system's going to go through and pull all of the purchase invoices that are out there and ready to be paid. And they would only be those posted purchase invoices. You're not going to pull something that's in and only been saved. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And this is going to tell me that it's created the suggest vendor payment lines for all currencies. And so I've got my 2 lines here. Within Business Central, then, I'm just going to click back up here because we don't need that additional line. If this vendor was set up and we wanted to do an ACH or an EFT, then we can define the bank account that the vendor has assigned of where that payment would need to go. In our payment method code, I'm just going to use check in this case because I want to do a check run. Another nice functionality piece within Business Central is the ability to do an F8, and that'll copy the information from the cell above. So similar to some of that Excel functionality where you can go in and just to make things faster, you can use F8 to copy that in. There is also the ability to do a function called edit in Excel where you can export this data to Excel, update the spreadsheet, and then import it back into Business Central. So very quick way to, if you need to post a transaction that you get in a CSV type file or an Excel file, then we can go ahead and bring those in very easily. Also, when you do the suggest vendor payments, it's going to automatically fill in those applies to document numbers that are related to this particular vendor for those invoices and the other criteria that we selected. Then our bank payment type, we're going to identify as computer check. Again, I could do F8 here if I wanted to copy that. And now I've defined that my transactions are ready to go to do the check run. Similar to Dynamics GP, you need to have separate batches for ACH versus computer checks. And so that in itself is just similar to Dynamics GP. So now we're going to go in and we're ready to print our checks. So I'm going to go choose to print my check. My journal template is going to default in. My checking bank account is going to default in. And I'm going to click on print. And that is going to generate then my check layout. And I know that's small and I apologize for that, but this is just the printout ready to print to paper for our checks. So typical layout, we can easily modify report layouts, or check layout. So if you're stub check stub, we can do that, or stub check, either way, or any one of those different layouts we can do there. And then I would print that out. I'm going to cancel that for now. The other call out that I want to make on this page is that once you print those checks, now your check printed box is marked here. So if you need to void a check, very similar to GP, you would go into check, do void check, void all checks. If you have to redo, so let's say you didn't have your check paper, your check stock in your printer, and you need to reprint them, then you can do that as well. You could go through the print again and reprint those to the check stock. Once the check printed is there, you do need to go in and your next step is to post and print. So in this case, I'm going to post my transactions. If I want to preview posting, I could do that. If I want to print the report, I can do that as well. So your journal log. So I'm going to go ahead and just post those transactions. It's going to tell me that my journal lines were successfully posted, and I can go look at my my journal register rather, and I can see that register entry number, my source code, the payment journal, and my amounts, as well as my balancing accounts here. So in this case, we know that it's going through our payment journal. It's going to go against our 20,000 account or AP, and that is our journal. So I'm going to go back into Business Central now, and we are going to jump over quick to our demo. And the last area that we're going to take a look at is Management Reporter versus Financial Reports. So for Management Reporter, you all should be fairly familiar with that the concept of your report definition is made up of a row definition and a column definition. So if you're using Management Reporter, this makes a lot of sense. So when you look at your report definition here, we're defining that our row is going to be our summary income statement and our column is going to be our periodic and year-to-date default. When we look at that row definition, we're defining our row codes, our descriptions. If we've got total lines that we want to bold, we can show those here. We've got our format codes, our formulas based on our row codes, what our normal balance is for these accounts, and then defining our accounts, whether it's by account category or by individual account number. You can do either one. And then when we look at our column definition, periodic and year-to-date, in this case, this is set up where we're working across, similar to a row definition. So column A is going to be our description. We've got our month and our year-to-date here. We're defining in our column types, our book codes, fiscal years, and that information. So the next place that we're going to jump over to is Business Central and look at the out-of-the-box financial reporting that Business Central has. So that was under Finance and Financial Reporting. And very similar to Management Reporter is that we have the name of our report, so essentially our report definition, and then we're also defining a row definition and a column definition. So in this case, I'm looking at an income statement, and I want to use a net change column definition for this report. I can go in and I can edit the financial report, meaning that if I want to use a different column definition, I can select that. If I want to use a different row definition for the report, I could do that as well. I also have the ability to go in and edit my row definition. So I'm just going to make sure I'm on this one, and we're going to go in and edit our row definition. So on our row definition here, very similar to Management Reporter, we have our row number, our description. If we want something bolded, we can do that type of identifier. So we can do bold, italics, underlined, or we can define to start a new page. So where you would build in a page cutoff and your row definition, you can do the similar thing here within Business Central. So then we have our income lines, our account numbers. We can see that we're looking at posting accounts versus a formula. So in this case, when we look at total income, we're looking at a formula for this, and we're totaling based on our row numbers. So very similar here. Here's our row numbers. We're going to sum P0001 through 08. You'll notice here that there's some different formatting to make that definition. Where we use a colon in Management Reporter, here we can use ... to do a range of row numbers. Up here in our posting accounts, where we did 40,000 through 40,001, again, we did the ... to do the range, but we can use the bar here to identify that there's a break. So we want to go from 40,000 to 40,001, and then we want to jump to 40,500 through 4999. So once you have your row definitions set up, we'll take a quick look at the column definition here. Really the only difference in our column definitions from Business Central to Management Reporter is here we're going to list down, just like we did in the row definition, versus in Management Reporter, when we do that column definition, it's going across horizontally. So from here, then we can open up the report. Once we go into this report here, very similar options. We can use our view by, whether we want to do year, day, month, quarter, accounting period, we can do that. Our date range, if we want to show all lines. And then we have the ability to filter on all of those department dimensions, customer group, cost centers. If we have those set up, we can run those here. And then at the bottom of the screen, you're actually going to get that first view of what your numbers look like based on that selection. If you want to print this out, we can go to Process and choose Print. This is going to print our report out, again, giving you those options. Do you want to do starting dates? What kind of breakout? Do you want to show row numbers? Do you want to see zero balances? Again, your dimension filters. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to print this. And this is going to print out our report and make it ready to print. Oh, sorry, I want to do that as a preview. So let me go to Print and then choose Preview. So I'll show you this first. So this is going to preview our report. That didn't work very well. So we'll preview our report, give us our starting date. So we have our income and services, our total income, our cost of goods, and our net income. And the other thing that's really nice with Business Central is anything that you would want to print to Excel, you can. And it all goes very, very nicely. So we can do a send to. You can choose to do a PDF. You could send this to Word if you wanted to. You can send this to Excel. And you can choose to do either data and layout or data only. So I'm going to choose OK and just do data. That's going to create our Excel report. And I will see if I can get that to open up. And let's not do this now. And this will give us our report here. So now you've got your report in Excel, and you can go ahead and do whatever you need to do with that in Excel. And thank you so very much for joining. Thank you, DynamicsCon, for hosting the session. Thank you all the voters who voted for this session. I really appreciate it. And again, I'm Deb Schaffer, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.